Hi, Michelle. I see you're here. Paul, I see you're here. Linda, Alexandria, Susan, Michael, May. Who else is here?
It's like we're Anisha's here. We're missing Jackie and Trevor.
Lisa's here.
Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Jackie's here.
Oh, Jackie's here.
Jackie's here. All right, we're going to get started. Yeah. So can everyone see the screen share, the CB3 screen share for tonight's agenda?
We're all good.
Okay, great. So I just want to take attendance really quick. So we did that. Trevor's still not in yet. Herman's still not in yet. Eric's.
Take the attendance by voting on the minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to do roll call.
We need to do a roll call.
You have to approve the minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need to approve the minutes from last month's meeting. So all in favor?
You need to do roll call.
Do roll call. Michelle, are you ready to do roll call?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alicia.
Also, will we also accept the agenda? Because I'd like to add an item to the agenda.
We typically don't vote on the agenda.
Yeah, we don't.
You can just,
Can you bring up what you want to add under new business, Lisa?
Sure, sure.
if I could suggest in the future, just send it ahead of time.
Fair enough.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Alicia,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes, ma'am.
Lisa,
Oh, yes, I'm sorry if I muted myself.
Eric,
Yes.
Eric, Michelle, yes, Herman. Oh,
Herman's not on.
that was Herman. Okay. Anisha,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
you, Jackie,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Trevor,
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
We're approved.
Great. Thank you all. So thank you all for being tonight for this Zoom meeting for our first executive meeting for the month of June. I just want to start off by saying I have made some major boo-boos. It happens, right? So at our last meeting, I think we're going to cover it as to the Zoom meeting procedures. But I mean, a lot has happened, and I don't know, so much happened at the last Zoom meeting. And I just want to give applause to Michael for handling it as well as he possibly could have. And just to let him know that I appreciate him dearly. I also wanted to say that we have a lot going on here in the city right now with all of the riots and with the looting, and it's just a tremendous amount of work that is going on. And I want to applaud the office for the work that they're doing, because Susan has been working for 12 hours straight for some days, and it is just a lot of work that has to get done for Community Board 3. So I thank the office, not just Susan, but also Jim, and also Ed, and also Deidre for working remotely. I know that it's a lot of work, even though I'm at a physical job. They are not. They are on virtual, so it's a lot of work that's being done. So I thank them. I also want to thank all of you for being so patient and for doing such a great job with your committee reports and getting them in on time to Susan and making sure that things are running as smoothly as they possibly can. I've been attending as many meetings as I possibly could, sitting in and listening in on as many as I could. And I just want to thank you all for that, for the work that you're doing. There was something that I wanted to share with you, just in general, just about just staying connected to one another and your committee members. I encourage you all to please stay connected to your committee members. A lot of members, they are not connecting at committee meetings. I don't know what's going on. Some people are not showing up to Zoom. So reach out to them and see what's happening. If you notice that you have members that are missing at your committee meetings, reach out to them. I have been trying to reach out to a few members in particular when I notice that there's more than one or two of them missing at a time. So I encourage you to please try to continue to reach out to committee members. What else did I want to share with you? I'm sorry, I didn't write it all down. But we'll go on further as we get into the Zoom meeting procedures. Also, we kind of dropped the ball on the training for the end of this month. The trainings that were supposed to take place, we needed to send out training dates, and I needed to have someone spearhead the training. I wanted to ask you, Lisa Kaplan, if you could possibly help out with the training, to coordinate it, if possible. If you have time to do that, I would greatly appreciate your help with that. And so we would need for you to kind of like, with the office, coordinate what the training is going to look like and making sure we have 2 separate dates for those trainings. So now we have to look at new dates in the month of July in order to make that possible. So I do apologize to everyone. I know I tried to commit to June training dates, but it is now like June 10th. And so I think it's a little late to have people try to get on for like a June 28th or a June 23rd type of thing. I don't know. I think we originally said like it was June 24th or something like that. And we had like 2 separate dates, but now we have to look in the month of July so that we're not pressed for time to get people on board for these trainings, because I think it's important to get as many of, not just the new members, but some of the newer members on board for training dates. And what that will look like. So Lisa, if you could help us out, I would greatly appreciate that. And I want to thank Michael for being actively involved in all of these Zoom meetings and making sure that they're running smoothly, and that great Zoom training that he gave the other night. It was awesome. Thank you, Michael, because I learned some things also about Zoom. So, and he's very patient. Thank you, Michael. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
My problem is I have a demanding job during the day, and it's very hard for me to do anything during the day. So coordinating with the staff may be difficult, but I'll do my best with that. But I feel like I have to put in that qualifier. Time during the day is just very difficult.
So they shouldn't be coordinated with me. I'm not the person that coordinates them, which is, I think, why we need a coordinator. I can tell you what trainings offline, I can tell you what trainings we did last year and who did them. And I have always done one with David Crane, but other than that, I've never been involved in the coordination.
So who is it that's going to tell me what the expectation is?
Okay, can I interrupt before we go down a rabbit hole here? Yeah. We've actually already discussed all this at previous exec meetings, and Alicia, I don't know if you have those notes available that maybe you can just send to Lisa, but we had already, when we talked about those 2 dates, we had already talked about what each of the trainings were going to be.
Actually, we stated that at the last exec meeting, Lisa, that the things that we wanted to cover during the exec, during these trainings. So it was just 2 separate trainings, and we can talk offline about that so we don't hold each other up. But I will definitely if you're willing to help us a little bit, take this on.
Sure.
Maybe if there's someone else that is wanting to help us also, that has a little more time, maybe we can get another person besides you, Lisa, to coordinate and get it all together. So that's number 8 on the agenda anyway, so we can go to that at number 8, okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. First Vice Chair.
I don't really have much to report. Earlier today, I actually participated in a webinar that was done by one of the city council members outside of our district, but he had the Department of Consumer Affairs Commissioner, Lorelei Salas, on, and she did a question and answer about workers' rights now that people are starting to return to work, and what they should expect and what they can fight for and whatnot. It's actually really well done, and it was recorded. So if anyone wants to see it, once I get the link to the recording, I can share it. But it made me think that if we could, maybe, I don't know, we can reach out to the commissioner and plan our own webinar with her and do something for our district. Susan, how does that work?
I actually just got DCA arranged for them to be on with Avima next week for a different kind of seminar. We could just ask. I don't understand exactly what it is you want to do, because if we arrange a seminar, then we're going to reach out to, who are we reaching out to?
Well, we can publicize it on our social media and to our, whatever email list or list we might have, and, get people to either submit questions. How it was done today was people can either submit questions ahead of time or ask them live while the seminar was going on by typing them into the chat box. And it was mainly just done as a full hour of question and answers about, people's questions and worries that they had while they are returning to the workforce as we begin phase 1.
Would you consider asking the 2 council persons to co-sponsor with us so that they could reach out to their list too, and we could just reach a much wider audience?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so it'd be a question of coordinating, just coordinating, asking them if they would do it, coordinating a time, and any of our offices could set it up for. If was it Commissioner
Salas, Lorelei Salas.
Okay, we can do that. We can because they just coordinate with the 2 offices and work offline to do it. Pick a time.
Okay, so should I email the 2 council members, or should I just talk to you offline?
Why don't you email the 2 chiefs of staff and get them to agree. It should be very easy.
Okay, will do. Thanks. That's it for me.
Thank you, Michael. Lisa, do you have anything that you'd like to contribute?
Nothing to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Treasurer's report, is Mr. Herman Hewitt on board? Herman, are you there? Hi, Herman. Can you unmute yourself? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, nothing to contribute, Alicia.
Herman, I wanted to ask you, were we able to get any other people on board for the Friends of?
I haven't seen the list that we have right now who responded. So if I could get that, I could follow up with some other people.
That's on me. I'll get that to you by the end of the week, Herman.
We should really be discussing that after the meeting.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear Herman.
I said we should be discussing that after this meeting.
Okay.
Not during the exec.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Herman. All right, Susan, District Manager's report.
Okay, I have some questions I want to ask. Procedures kind of change, and just what you need to do changes every month with this pandemic. So there's some things that I want to just make sure we're all on the same page. One thing is draft resolutions. So we generally have, for most items, draft resolutions for committees. If we have an organization or a person that's coming to us for support, we generally ask them to at least do an original draft. For instance, Christine Datz for tomorrow night has asked for support for the Ecology Center, so she drafted a resolution for us. Other times we do it in the office. We do it, we start the draft, we do it with the committee chairs. Generally, it's done right before the meeting. We have never, until this month for one committee, we have never sent them out to anyone in advance of the meeting. But at physical meetings, we bring copies and everybody has copies to read. It came up twice this month. Once David Crane was involved in the decision. He was going to be on this meeting, but I don't think he is. His position was that it should be sent out because he felt it was almost more like having a private meeting by the chair sending out a draft and saying, you know, this is what I think we should be doing. Or I'm sorry he's not here. Anyway, one of the reasons it never occurred to me during physical meetings to send them in advance was because I was afraid they would end up in the media and then something we didn't actually vote on, or, you know, that was not, you know, sometimes they change totally, and that something would be out there that was did not resemble what the committee voted on. So I just want to get everybody, I want to see what should we be doing, and just have us all on the same page.
Sorry, Alicia, I muted you because of the background noise. Say that again.
Oh. Alex, I see your hand.
Sure. Look, I appreciate that we're having this discussion. I think that where I've seen an issue is not that we're getting the drafts in advance, but that often the drafts look like indications of items that should be more specifically identified on the agendas where we're hearing them. So that's only been my issue. So if we have a draft enough in advance that we understand what the topic is, and it seems to be not covered by what's on the agenda, I feel like we have an obligation to at least give notice to the community that we're going to be addressing that topic, even if we're not disseminating a draft, so that people can look on the website, even if it's with very short notice, and come to meetings and give comment regarding that specific topic.
So if I could address that, I think what you're bringing up is a totally different subject than what I'm bringing up. There was one mistake this month in doing stuff kind of quickly, and an agenda item got on an agenda that was not clear. And we all understand that that was a mistake, and that's totally separate, a totally separate issue. We generally take a lot of pride in our agendas being very, very clear. And I think if you look at them over the last 15, 16 years, you'll find it's very rare. It does happen, but it's very rare. So that's a different issue. I'm not talking about the public whatsoever in this. It's simply about sending something out. And of course, one of the issues is then it gets to some of the public, but not all the public. So I'm talking about strictly the issue of sending it to the committee.
I'm sorry, you might have your own issue, but I feel that you shouldn't belittle my raising the issue. The issue I think is relevant, and it happened last month and this month. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up, because I think we have an obligation to inform the public that we're hearing certain topics. If we have a draft in advance regarding a topic that isn't well communicated on our agenda, and we talk about it at a meeting, then we're not going to have the public participation that we would have if we just provided some notice of any kind, even if it's a few hours. So that was the issue I had with seeing these, like hearing about drafts in advance. not necessarily with getting drafts in advance, but I appreciate that there's a discussion about how they might be disseminated, how we should get them, you know, whether I think it's all understood amongst us that we shouldn't be disseminating them to others, you know, so I appreciate that discussion as well.
On a question. I realize the issue you're bringing up is a very legitimate issue. I'm happy to discuss it, but that's not what I am discussing right now.
And I'm saying to discuss both. Thank you, Susan.
Well, it's my report and that's not what I'm discussing. I need to know this information.
Okay, I see a few raised hands. I see Lisa, you're next, then Trevor, Linda, and Mei Lee.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate Susan bringing this up because I think it is an important issue. But I think it is integrally connected to what Alex is talking about and what I wanted to talk about and was asked to put into new business. There really needs to be as much disclosure as we can possibly do in every aspect of our work. And even with the coronavirus, I would argue that we still have that ongoing responsibility. So I think both that if there are draft resolutions, they should be distributed to the members of that committee with as much advance notice as possible. And I also think we have to do some very close and careful discussion of how detailed agenda items need to be to really capture what's going to be discussed at a meeting. Because what happened at the Economic Development Committee meeting this past month and in the month before that at the Transportation Committee threw the members of those committees completely off guard. And it was very troubling. I got several phone calls about it. And I think it's really damaging our reputation, which we've worked very hard to develop over the years of being as transparent and public facing as we can possibly be. And I really fear that we might be losing that if we fall into what I think, you know, the difficulty that the COVID emergency raises. I don't think we should be letting our guard down.
So if I could say,
Susan, excuse me, I knew nothing of any complaints of anyone. So if you could redirect people to me or to Susan, that would really be helpful, Lisa, because I didn't know anything about anybody's complaints. I could address it if I know about it, but I didn't know anything about it.
So you didn't know anything about difficulties at the Economic Development Committee?
If I could ask, the agenda is a different procedure. I 100% agree with you. I'm happy to discuss that procedure. But could we please just get through some of the questions that focus and give me yeses or no? Lisa said yes, she thinks the resolution should be distributed. Could we take care of that question? And I'm happy to discuss the procedure on the agenda as a section of this. But if we could just focus on one part at a time. I agree 100% as far as being completely as transparent as possible.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And Lisa, I acknowledge what you're saying. I did know that there were some difficulties. I do know that. Thank you.
So what is the exec's decision on the draft resolutions are often ready?
Trying to raise our hands.
Shortly before.
Linda has her hand up, Susan, and Trevor, and so did Mei Lee. So Trevor was next, Linda, and then you, and then Mei Lee.
That's fine.
Trevor?
I guess some of my question has been answered because I was trying to figure out what we're discussing right now. And do we have any guidance within the bylaws other than David being here.
No.
So are we discussing whether we should send out resolutions to the committee members in advance, and whether that's viewed as a discussion or an opinion of the chair? Or are we discussing whether we should continue what we've been doing and distribute it at a meeting? Is that your question, Susan? Because I'm just trying to figure out what we're talking
Which
about.
should we do? Yes, which should we do so we're all on the same page? So that I know to do the same for everybody. Should we share them on the screen and email them to the members at the beginning of the meeting, or should we email them to the members before the meeting? It will be shortly before the meeting.
I think that we should email members before the meeting because people need time to review. So long as people are actually reviewing it, because it is the history of many community board members that they don't have an opportunity to read over things because their work schedules are very busy. But we do have to be as transparent, like Lisa said, as possible, so that board members get an opportunity to read the materials in advance. So yes, Susan, please let's assure that we send out materials in advance.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, sometimes it might be 5 minutes in advance.
Yeah, I'm still looking. So the drawback to doing that, you say, Susan, is that it's a draft, and we have colorful members on our committees that it might get to the press and it's not a full resolution, or is the drawback, or is that part of the drawback? And the other drawback is it's viewed as an opinion from the chair of the committee.
That was the second part was David Crane's opinion. My concern was that it will, and I know it'll happen. It happened this month with the land use, where someone discussed in the media the draft resolution, not the final one from the committee. So yeah, I'm afraid we'll be misrepresented.
Well, I'm going to look to the experienced members on this committee. I'm not sure. So.
Okay, next we have Linda.
Okay, yeah, I would weigh in that we should distribute the draft resolution. We have had, I mean, we can reinforce with our committees the fact that they need to keep this within the committee and not talk about it in the press. I think most of them know better. But sometimes, especially land use, that last resolution was pretty complicated. And I think it was good. And, those other people here like Lisa who had a chance to look at it in advance might agree with me that it's important. And you can think out what changes you want before the meeting.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Maylee?
Hi, so when we had in-person meetings, I always, even if we had a draft resolution, I distributed at the last minute. Usually there was a speaker, usually there was some information sheets or, fact sheets from the speaker. So the way I like to run it is, first it's an agenda item. If the speaker is requesting something from us, it is clear from the agenda item that something is being requested. The committee gets background information. Hopefully the speaker has provided it, and then the speaker comes. And then after the speaker talks, I hand them a piece of paper right after that that has the draft resolution, and that's the first time they see it. So, actually, it happened to us at least once, I think, when the committee heard the speaker and they were so upset they started asking questions. They were so upset about it that we never got to the resolution because it was about landlords enforcing smoke-free homes. So they knew that smoke-free homes was good, but the part about landlords enforcing them was, they were very uncomfortable. So they decided to put it off or, table it to another time. And we never even got to the resolution. If I had handed out the resolution in the beginning, well, you know what would have happened. So so it makes them free. They're free to decide what they want to do. That's kind of the process I would like to keep. during these Zoom meetings. Now, I think with these Zoom meetings, the problem is that there may be a problem when you email something at the last minute and they can't access it because, there's all these windows and, they may just not have the technology to do it. So if that's the case, we could email it to them a little bit beforehand, just so they have access to it while they're at the meeting.
It may not be
I would
ready.
like to keep the same, as much as possible, keep the same process that I had during the in-person meetings, and I just described it to you.
Thank you, Mei Lee. Michelle?
Thanks, Felicia. I just wanted to say as a member, it's very difficult to sort of like on the fly react to a resolution that's already written. And, we spent a little bit of time at the top of this meeting talking about transparency. It doesn't feel very transparent for the rank and file members to not have the chance to review what's already been written by the office. Now, if we were writing the resolutions without any guidance in the meeting, I'd feel very differently, but that's not how we operate. And often by the time we get to the resolution, people are at the point where they're like, we'll make a few changes, but like, let's just basically do whatever's written here. And so I know I don't feel like I can thoughtfully respond to what's in the resolution without having at least some time to review it. And especially since I take the notes during the meeting, I don't really even have time during the meeting to review it. So that's just how I feel. Although I take into consideration all of the points about them leaking and being misconstrued because they're not past resolutions. I would hope, that perhaps we would need to have some sort of agenda item at a full board meeting where we talk to people about this and explain to them the importance of keeping things quiet until, or not, I shouldn't say quiet, but that it's a committee only resource until it's actually passed in the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. That was helpful. Okay, next we have Lisa.
Yeah, two things I wanted to add. One was, I don't think it's fair to say that the only time this has ever happened was like in the last month. Linda can confirm this, but we used to get the land use ULURP measures and other resolutions in the land use committee ahead of time, well ahead of time. And I really do think it's very helpful. The second thing I have to say is I think if we're asking an outside source to draft something, we should give them a time to get it to us in advance so we can get it to the committee members at least a day in advance, because as I mentioned before, I have a demanding job, and if I get a resolution at 4 for a 6:30 meeting, I am not going to be, it won't help me a bit. I might as well just see it at the full board. I need the night before. So I don't, and I think if we're asking an outside body, or especially, but the body that writes it should be identified. So that we understand if the drafter had a particular point of view, we know what that is.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Paul?
I think there's a few other people ahead of me.
You were next in line, but okay. Can you go ahead, Paul?
Yeah, I'll go. I just wanted to say the same thing. I think it would be cool for, at least in my committee, to see the resolutions ahead of time, have something to think about and work with when we go in. Michelle kind of already said it. I think it's just a good thing for us to work off of, and when we make the changes, hearing what the community has to say at the meeting, we can make those changes to that draft. It's a draft for a reason. We can make the changes we need to make. That's it.
Thank you, Paul. Michael?
Thanks, Alicia. Sorry, I can't raise my hand, so I've been texting Alicia that I wanted to speak. So I agree that I think getting them ahead of time helps, but getting them at 4 or 5 o'clock doesn't help. I also want to add that there is a, in Word, we can use watermarks to say draft or confidential to add that. And if people at the office need a lesson on how to do that, I'm happy to.
No, we don't need a lesson.
But I think that, we should be utilizing watermarks on the drafts, and we might also want to send out the drafts to the committees as PDFs as opposed to as Word documents so that they can't change them to make them more restrictive on what people can do with them. I do want to echo what Lisa said, that if we are asking outside entities to write the draft for us, then that needs to be identified in some way, shape, or form at the meeting to the committee members. And I think that's not what happened at economic development. And I think that's why there was a lot of questions about those resolutions at economic development, because it was clear that nobody, that they were written by an outside person or entity.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we're definitely distributing them ahead of time. If ULURPs went out, I just wasn't aware of it. The chair was doing it on their own. As far as drafts, we certainly know how to watermark with draft. I don't think it's really a good idea to do a PDF. I would think would be more useful to the member to be able to track changes that they want to do and present at the meeting. As far as when we have outside people do it, 100% of the time it's the presenter. Now, we do go over it. We don't take their drafts, because if they wrote, send something that's ridiculous and self-promoting, we change that. But we use it as a way to save work by getting them to put down the essential things. As far as getting stuff, how far in advance, I'm going to say, like, Christine sent me her draft about 2 weeks ago. About an hour ago, I never read it. About an hour ago, I sent it to Jim and said, do you have time to look at this? So particularly now, we'll get them out before the meeting, but I will not promise when they will get out. We'll do the best we can. And like I say, when an outside body does it, maybe what you want to know is that an outside body did it. And the chair is always aware of that. So perhaps when they introduce the presenter and the reso, they can say that that person drafted, the resolution asking for support.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Alex?
Shall I go on to the next thing?
Alex had her hand up, and so did Jackie. So let's let them ask their question. Go ahead, Alex.
And I thought Jackie.
Yeah, you're next.
Alex will go first.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. I was just going to say that it's very helpful to get drafts in advance, especially when they relate to policy decision-making or changes, so that you do have an opportunity to consider them in advance and maybe consider the potential consequences of approving something as opposed to not approving something, or being able to review each of the whereas clauses. Practically speaking, while we're having these kinds of meetings, it is very difficult to first use my computer to reference the email while we're on the conference, but then also to follow the host who's maybe scrolling through the document line by line and going back and forth depending upon each speaker's questions or what they're concerned with. So that's very difficult, pragmatically.
You're exactly right, and that's why I brought it up. But I think we've decided now that it's happening. There was something else?
Yeah, Jackie had his hand up, and then Anisha.
Yes, I just want to say I also support we provide a draft in advance of the committee meetings. And I also want to clarify that at the last land use committee meeting, the draft was not distributed to committee members before the meeting, but we did have one board member who misrepresented RESO information after the RESO was adopted by the full board. So I just want to make that clarification.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. Anisha?
I also just wanted to add my voice of support for sending things in advance. In economic development, we sent it like an hour in advance for this past month because, you know, I just assumed that that was supposed to happen. I think I was surprised that there was such a level of astonishment from the committee members. And I think that really goes to the issue of transparency. And it's not just a transparency issue that perhaps there was a mistake or it wasn't super clear with the agenda item that was listed on the, or like how the item was listed on the agenda, that there would be a resolution or a number of resolutions. I think there was also, you know, not a lot of transparency. And I hope that this can change that, you know, we should also share with other committee chairs when things overlap or when things, you know, might involve SLA or anything else, that we give a heads up as just like professional human beings working together in this space. Because I felt like that also didn't happen both this month and last month. There seemed to be particular agenda items that came in at the last minute under that these were sort of, you know, emergencies or time sensitive things because of the coronavirus, but it didn't seem like there was even in that sort of time sensitivity, we still should be transparent with other members of the committee that these things are there and are coming to specific committees for whatever reasons they are coming to those committees.
So
Thank
just
you.
to clarify, is the chairs that would share with the other chairs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Alicia,
That's good.
can I make either a point of order or just a friendly suggestion? I feel like there's still a couple of hands up, but I feel like we've discussed this issue
Yeah.
for a rather long time now, and I feel like we've come to some sort of a resolution where it's okay to send them ahead of time as long as the chair is okay with it, and if May doesn't want it, then May doesn't do it, kind of thing, and that we'll start using watermarks to keep them more confidential or marked as drafts.
Yeah, I think the office does that already.
Decided.
Susan, I'm just gonna say that the office does a lot of the watermarking of draft. They let them know in advance for a few things. But I mean, I do understand what everyone is saying about as far as resolutions, getting them in advance so that members get an opportunity to read them.
It's fine. It's absolutely fine. I just wanted direction. And it's not a problem.
Yeah. Trevor,
actually,
Susan, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Trevor, do you have something to say that is hasn't been said already?
Yeah, and we draw up a lot of our resolutions at committee, and some of the more complex ones we draw up at committee. It's been hours, so I'd love to see draft resolutions. I just don't see enough of them because a lot of stuff is going on. But my question for those who send or have sent out the resolutions in advance, how do you deal with comments and questions from your committee members? Even though you're supposed to have a one-way. I know, so you just ignore them? You just ignore them completely?
So if I could make a suggestion on that, first of all, you have everyone in BCC, so they can't reply all. But what I generally advise chairs to do is to include a sentence saying, do not reply or comment. This is for you to discussion at the meeting.
I hope that works with my
committee.
It
always has.
Okay, I saw Maylee's hand and I see Alex's hand. So go ahead, May.
I just have a few words. So what Trevor said is another reason why I don't like to send them out too far in advance. You know, they think it's a done, I mean, it's natural. You think it's a done deal. You just focus on the resolution when there's a lot of background information you need to consider to make the right decision. So I guess it depends upon the issue, but that's, and maybe that sounds very idealistic, but that's the process I hope the committee can go through each time with the resos. So if we're to send them out in advance, I would just want to put in as much background information, and I can work with Susan on that, and we can make the speaker send it.
Okay, so to finalize this, because I'm now hearing different things as far as my direction. First of all, Trevor, I always do a resolution in advance when we can. Sometimes you don't know what the presentation is going to be, so you can't. And you understand that.
Yeah, I understand.
So
Believe me, I
now,
understand.
what Michael summarized is that we're going to do different things for different committees compared to what the chair wants. I think that's a real problem. I think it's a problem for the office to treat each committee that differently. And I also think it's a problem for committee members who, particularly at overlap committees, who are going to have expectations for one and not for the other. I think it's much better to have a policy for the board.
I'm perfectly fine having it be the same for everyone. I was just trying to come to a compromise since May was very adamant that she didn't want to do it. So if we want to.
No, I'm perfectly fine with going with what the majority wants. I mean, I will just, adjust my thing and, really tell the committee 100 times. It's not a done deal. I think that's what they need to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
So I can go on to the next item?
No, not yet, because we still had Alex's hand and Linda's hand. And this is going to be it on this subject. Susan, let me just run the meeting. So this is going to be it after Linda's comment. And Alex, do you have anything else that hasn't been said?
No, it's fine.
Thank you, Alex. Linda, is there anything that hasn't been said?
I think it might be helpful, Susan, to just send the draft to the chair and let the chair decide whether to distribute it to the committee or not.
That's fine.
That takes the burden off of you, and it lets each chair, do what they want to do.
That's fine. And that's exactly what we've been doing, so there's no change for us.
There we go.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Susan, next item.
I'm sorry. You don't want me to go on?
No, yeah, I said next item.
Oh, okay. So this is, again, something that came up this month. There have been shares that we all know that we don't vote on something that's not on the agenda. We all know that anyone can talk about anything in public session for 2 minutes. What is unclear in different chairs handled differently, but I need to know the policy to explain to people, is there a discussion on something not on the agenda? And I have heard many chairs say, people, that it hasn't been posted, so people aren't there to have the discussion. And I've heard other chairs, and it did come up this month, not from a chair, from a committee member, that we should have a discussion on something not on the agenda, but not vote on it. So I would like clarification of a policy so that I can explain to people, this is how the committees work or how they don't.
Okay, will anyone like to comment on that, what Susan just said?
I mean, I've always worked under the assumption that if it wasn't on the agenda, it could not be discussed or voted on by the committee. That, like Susan said, anybody could bring it up as an issue, but that the committee couldn't and shouldn't discuss it or vote on it.
Okay.
Now there's hands going up.
Okay, Mei Lee and then Jackie.
I have the same assumption as Michael, and if people want to talk about it, we could discuss next steps as to how but we would not discuss the substance of the issue. Just next steps on, discuss at next meeting or whatever.
Okay, Jackie
and
then Alex.
I have the same feeling because if I'm not entirely familiar with a subject or have the background information, I just don't feel comfortable talking about it publicly. So I would say if somebody bring up an issue that needs to be discussed, that we can look into that, but not right at that meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Alex? Alex? Hello? Alex?
She put her hand down, so she might not want to make a comment anymore.
Thank you. All right, Susan?
Okay, so
An assumption about it. I'm not making an assumption about it. I've actually sat through many, many executive committee meetings where we've had discussions about what an agenda item should reflect, whether it should reflect a discussion as opposed to a discussion and a vote, based on what information we had. And I understand that sometimes subjects will be raised during the course of a discussion that you might not have anticipated, but if it's an anticipated discussion and vote, then it should be reflected on an agenda, I think, because we do have an obligation to give public notice. And we are the first place for the public of any kind to come and comment on something that appears on our agenda. So I feel like we have an obligation to be as specific as possible where we can, so that they have notice of something that may interest them and that they may want to appear and speak to.
So the clarification, when I said, is there a discussion, something on the agenda? This is something that's not on the agenda and something the public would bring up, because the chair wouldn't bring it up because it's not on the agenda. This is something like the public, and this happens all the time because different boards act differently and people don't know our regulations. So we have in writing, we can't vote on it if it's not on the agenda. Everybody understands that. We've been very clear about when something's informational, not being voted. So the issue is not about when anything's on the agenda. The issue is when it is totally unanticipated and someone brings up, like for instance, if someone had come to the Public Safety Committee and said, I want to discuss defunding the police, which was a big issue. It was very possible that could have happened. It didn't, but if that issue had come up and it was totally unanticipated, until like the day before when this became an item, how would the chair handle it? So what I am hearing is the chair would say, we could possibly take that up at another meeting, but it is not on the agenda to discuss tonight. So I think everybody's pretty much in agreement on that. So those were the two things that I wanted specific answers on, and thank you. It's really helpful to have clear information. I have a bunch of other things I just wanted to discuss.
Hold on, Susan. Alex had her hand up. Alex, is this in response to what Susan just said?
No, it's fine.
Thank you. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, so I have a number of other things, and I know you want to discuss agenda procedure, so I'll put that at the end. I'll try and be quick. So for agendas, we try as hard as we can to be accurate on the agendas. Sometimes we get very specific things, sometimes we get topics or ideas. Again, it's easier at exec because everybody has that draft in front of them. What I have been doing since we've been having virtual meetings is, first of all, I've been working more with the chairs before the exec so that we could come to agreement on the agenda. And I've been emailing a draft agenda to every exec member the day of the agenda, earlier in the day. So that is your first chance to look at the agenda. Sometimes we make terrible mistakes, and it's certainly happened more in the last 2 months. And just today, I found a terrible mistake that we made in the office. So I'm asking you, when you get, and I know everybody has a lot going on, but you can focus on your agenda. When you get your draft agenda, please check that the wording is correct, that all the items are there. I send them out again, we send them out twice. I also send them out the day of the full board. So that is your second chance to check the agenda, particularly if there's been any changes made. So I'm really, I need you to check your agendas. So I'm kind of begging for that. The other thing I want to ask you to check is after a full board meeting, we have the vote sheet on the website, generally by noon, but definitely by 3 o'clock. If you have an item in your committee where changes were made, there's a lot going on at those meetings, please read your agenda items and make sure that changes were made correctly, because it's just very easy to have one word that might mess up something. So if there's no questions on any of that, I just want
to. Michael had a question. Michael, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Susan said. I think that, you know, some of the onus is on the chairs to make sure that their agendas are correct. But I also want to make sure that when they're doing that, if you're going to have a presenter, that needs to be on the agenda as well. I think that that was another thing that derailed the beginning of economic development last week, was that nobody knew that there was 3 presenters. They weren't listed on the agenda. Somebody even interrupted at one point and said, you're going over the 2 minutes, because they didn't realize that they were actually a presenter and not just a public speaker. So I think if you're planning on having somebody speak on an agenda item, that needs to be listed on the agenda as well.
So sometimes it's really not known, and I'll give you an example for, it was put on the agenda to review the event on the police event on 9th Street and Avenue D. After the agenda was out, I had the idea of asking CCRB to come. I checked it with the chair. He said yes. We just didn't know that we were going to do that. So ordinarily, I'd say 99% of the time that should happen. And we generally will say like DOE : blah, you know, or LES partnership. So we'll make every effort to do that. There is occasionally, I found out like an hour before the Transportation Committee meeting that Katie from Carlina's office was going to come give an update. But 99% of the time we can do that. And perhaps the other times, you know, the chair can announce in the beginning if it's something since the agenda, the chair could say, announce the presenters.
Can I ask a question, Susan, about that? So I know that, you know, we have to give a certain amount of notice before, you know, to update an agenda or whatever, you know, so people know what's happening. Is there any reason that if that were to happen in the future where it's not on the published agenda, but we know somebody is coming, could we use our social media to tell people that, or is that not allowed?
I can't see why that would be a problem.
Okay, so then let's start doing that when we remember.
It's another thing to remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to announce, not everybody is aware that the community board does get foiled. I am the FOIL officer. There are criteria for foiling, which is on our website under member resources, and it's the office handbook. So it's just an FYI. Another FYI, the office is planning that we'll have virtual meetings at least through August. Can't imagine anything differently would happen. Another thing, I just kind of want to bring up something I've seen brand new in committees. Elected official reps often come to committee meetings. They come because they want to hear what the public wants. And all of a sudden, people are start asking them if they want to speak. I've never seen that happen before. I would recommend against it, because the purpose, they give reports at full board. The purpose of them being there, unless we've asked them for help, is to listen to us, not for us to listen to them. So just wanted to mention, that's kind of a new thing that happened. There is going to be a town hall that the elected officials and community board are going to co-sponsor for 70 Mulberry Street. They had hoped to have it in the beginning of June. That didn't happen. So it's going to be probably the end of June. And I just want to use this opportunity to say, Michael, the agencies cannot set up a Zoom meeting. So they're asking the sponsors, and Margaret's office can't set up a large meeting. So I volunteered us to set up the meeting. Gigi will still, because I know you love doing that, and Gigi will still, you know, take most of the responsibility of running it.
Who do I send my consultant invoice to?
Margaret Chin. But she already gives us money every year, so I guess we can't do that.
Hold on a sec. Michelle had her hand up. Michelle?
Yeah, sorry, just going back to the original question that you had, Susan, about allowing public discussion for items not on the agenda. Did we come to a conclusion about that?
Sounds to me like everyone thinks we shouldn't be doing it.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Am I understanding correctly?
Yes.
I just want to tell somebody when tell you guys what I'm dealing with the elected official offices. For many, many years, particularly on constituent issues, we've all worked together, often, not all the time, but often, because constituents often contact multiple offices. We always have like one office take the lead. It depends on the issue. For instance, we always take SLA problems because the community board is the body that's consulted. This situation we still work really well with both council members, but I'm going to say, and I know the meeting's being recorded, it's gotten totally out of hand with everyone else. Everybody is competing on issues and creating chaos. And I'm going to say that they respond to issues more by what's trending on media. And it's very difficult. I've tried sort of gently trying to work with some of the reps and not been successful. It's been suggested that maybe I call a meeting. It just makes working very difficult, and it makes resolving issues much more difficult. So I'm just kind of letting you know that that's existing. SYEP, again, more good news. I have a meeting every other week with CAU does for all the district managers just during this emergency period. And the commissioner said that, they are allocating funds from the police budget for youth services. It looks like it'll be SYEP. They'll let us know, keep us updated on the impact on SYEP, but it looks like at least, we'll have some success there. So I wanted to share good news. We had about 70 businesses in CV3 that were looted or damaged. That was the list. The mayor's office asked for a list. There looks like there will be some grants from both city and state. So I put together a list working with the police and the bids, and particularly Laura from EVCC. It was kind of shocking. I just didn't expect it to be so many, and I know it's incomplete. I know there were many, many more. And going back to the agenda issue, there clearly have been mistakes made. I think people are very aware there were mistakes made as far as the wording on the agenda. As I said, I give the chairs 2 drafts to look at to make any changes. If for some reason that procedure, you can think of a better procedure, please let me know. And we'll do that. Like I said, I've been emailing, and I know it's much harder to open emails and look at them rather than having a piece of paper in front of you. I think, we're all suffering from that. If there's anything else I can do, please let me know.
Thank you, Susan. So now we'll move on to the dreaded Zoom meetings for full board especially. So we're going to take this piece by piece. So we have the public session. So let's talk about it, everybody. Let's talk about it.
Well, Alicia, can I make a suggestion? I mean, we all know that last month's meeting was just epic. So rather than rehash everything that went wrong at that meeting, I'd rather just have a discussion about maybe what we can improve upon in all of our various sections. And, I'm happy to start with the public session. I think that, public session has been run the past 2 meetings with us just reading testimony that has been submitted. And part of the reason it went really long this past meeting was because a lot of the testimony that was submitted for the land use item that was on the agenda there were 2-page letters, and we read 4 of them. And they weren't, we didn't time it because we had volunteer board members read them for us. So it went longer. What I would like to propose for this meeting is, now that we have the functionality with the timer to let people, and we can let people speak, even if they join the meeting as an attendee, I can still allow them to speak. What I would like to propose is that instead of testimony being submitted ahead of time and written and then read by one of us, that we post the speaker form as an editable PDF on our website. We ask for people to submit the speaker form ahead of time with what agenda item they want to speak on, and then we let them speak for the 2-minute time limit that they're allowed to speak for if we were having a live meeting.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I saw Lisa's hand and then Mei Lee's hand. Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
My suggestion would be that we do a couple of things to limit the elected officials and to rearrange the order of the meeting so that we get to our agenda at the beginning, and ask for the general public to speak on or to provide information on their position on any items we're going to vote on. Then we vote on the items, and then we take elected officials and general comments from the public after we finish our agenda. And that we say to the elected officials, we tell them in advance that you have, as a group, 1 hour and a half or something. My suggestion is 1 hour and a half. Talk among yourselves, get your staff people to coordinate what you talk about, and we'll start 1 month with the highest ranking electeds and the next month with the lowest ranking. If we don't get to everybody, we'll get you next month. And we only take questions from members regarding items that relate to the agenda, to the elected officials. Those are my suggestions.
Thank you, Lisa. I believe Mei Lee and then Michelle.
And then
And Susan as well, Alicia.
Okay, I didn't see Susan's hand. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Is it me or is it Susan?
Yeah, no, it's you, May, and then it's Michelle and Susan.
Oh, okay. So I have 2 suggestions. One is around the elected officials and the questions and answers. So most of the questions and answers, the questions are asked are related to what the elected officials are saying. So it is related to their agenda, but the
Our agenda.
Oh, our agenda. Okay, forget it then. Okay. Well, that's a good way to limit, but we need to limit those Q&As. Okay, so then the other thing was that chat box, that people were typing stuff in the chat box and started talking to each other. And we need to keep people out of the chat box. We should limit its use and keep reminding people. There's a lot of people out there that it is only to be used for certain things. So we may want to use it just for people who have technical issues and they need help. And that's about it.
Can I?
Like they have audio and video issues, for example, and someone needs to assist them out of it, or they're on the wrong side, of the webinar side instead of the other side. But if there is anything related to substance, I think they need to raise their hand and talk.
Can I bring us back to order? We purposely broke this up into 4 sections, and we're talking about all 4 of them at the same time. So can we deal with public session first?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
As a comment or a suggestion about making public session better, Susan.
Okay, so I have.
Okay, next in line. Wait. Next in line was Michelle and then Susan.
Okay.
Thanks, Alicia.
Michelle.
You can hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
A couple of suggestions. I went to a CV2 meeting this month, and they have a sign-up form to allow you to get the Zoom link. That was for a committee meeting. I'm not sure what they do for their full board meeting. I know we don't take attendance at the full board. We only do that at the committees. but that could be a way to get a sense of who will be coming. And also you could make an option for if you want to be a speaker. That's one option. The other option is if we don't want to do that for everyone and just the link is posted on the website, we could also do a Google form for any speakers. And so that would just auto-populate into a response spreadsheet. I'm not sure if we're allowed to use, I don't know if there are any rules against using Google Forms or anything like that, but if there's some sort of Microsoft parallel, I think that would be really helpful as well. And you wouldn't even need to go through all the responses. They just all be there for you, easy to click on. And then we could easily do what Michael said, which was then just let whoever that person was who signed up read their own already submitted comment and do the 2-minute timer. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Susan?
Okay, so I think, our physical meetings, we have a good procedure, and I think it should be as close as possible. We have the fillable speaker forms ready to go. They should be available to everyone. They should be on the website, and they should be available to everyone because that's what we do at the meetings. We're not asking them to read the speaker forms. We're asking them to submit the speaker forms. That actually makes it much easier for us because those are foilable documents that we have to keep forever. So I would be able to just print them out and file them. And it also allows, if we only allow, I think it's 4 speakers per side. I'm not sure how many, but that way if there's more than one, that allows us to say there's too many, you have to do that. So I think that's a very good way to do it. But my question, my one issue that I have is that last month when we asked people to sign up, we asked them to sign up if they wanted to submit testimony, to submit it by Monday at 4. Well, I was actually getting testimony during the meeting, and we needed to organize it. We needed to put it in for and against, and it was just horrible, and it was very stressful. I would like to have a date, time and a date when those forms must be submitted, and I would like to make it like maybe Monday at noon, and keep to that time. So that's my suggestion for public session. I think asking some of the people from the public to wait till the end of the meeting to make comments, I don't think that would be taken well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with Susan with that one. I think that setting a time, a cutoff time, would be very helpful to the public because they really don't understand the procedures. I know that, I'm sorry, Susan, go.
I just want to say, as far, public session is very important. And I think for people to come give an announcement about their organization or something important, I think it's a really valuable thing we offer the community. I don't think it's abused. And, I think changing the whole structure of that for, I don't know how much longer we're going to be doing this. I just think it would be difficult.
Thank you, Susan. I think I saw Alex and then Linda. Am I correct? Alex, did you have your hand up? No. Linda?
Yes. First of all, I think Michael's, what he's introduced in the beginning was pretty good. Adding to it what Susan said, I think we should establish a procedure that everybody can understand. If their speaker sheet is not in by 4 o'clock the day before the meeting, they're not going to speak. We have a deadline. Let's make it easy for the office. People, when they know that, they'll adhere to it.
Yeah.
And we need to remind them that they have 2 minutes. Just make a little list of the rules. It's pretty much the same rules we run by now, except that it's Zoomed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Linda.
Does that make sense, Susan?
Yeah, and the rules are actually already on the website.
And we may just rewrite them a little bit for Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I just would like to make it earlier than 4 o'clock.
Well, make it whatever you want it to be.
Well, I want consensus. I want to get consensus that we all agree on a time and maybe a compromise somewhere between 12 and 4.
Just one more tiny point. I'd like to be able to use the speaker forms for my committee as well. And I don't know about the other committees, but it's good to have that record of who came to speak.
I
Okay.
agree. Yeah, thank you. Thank
So
you.
do we, Alicia, do we need to vote on a new procedure, or do we just need to come to a consensus, right?
I think we should just come to a consensus. So
Do you want to try to repeat it, or do you want me to try to repeat it?
no, I believe that what Susan said is good. We could just go from there. So all that agree that we should have the office receive speaker sheets by noon or at least before 4:00 p.m. Let's say who all is in favor, raise your hand, or say acknowledge it. I don't know how we're going to do this. Acknowledge it. Go ahead.
I'm fine with it being by noon.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. I'm fine with noon.
Okay.
Michelle.
I was just raising my hand to say yes.
4 o'clock is kind of late.
Noon is okay. Noon is okay with you, Michelle?
Noon is okay with me.
Okay. Thank you, Herman. Anyone else? Noon is okay?
I like 12.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So the next.
It looks like, yeah, go ahead. It looks like everyone is on board for 12 o'clock, Susan.
Okay, great.
Okay, the next thing is the elected officials report. So I just want to say that it's important for the elected officials to come to us during this time of COVID, because many of them have things that they need to share that we would not necessarily hear from them. I know that Carlina has been doing a great job of having these weekly meetings online on Facebook, and I think Gail also has been having some meetings as well. But we have quite a few of elected officials that have not been using technology to that extreme to have meetings so that the public can weigh in and hear. So they use our community board meeting as a platform for them to address what is going on in the assembly or at the council. And so I know sometimes they get a tendency to get long-winded, but a lot of the information is very useful, and a lot of the board members ask very good questions. I do understand that they can get long-winded at times, and we can maybe say like maybe 10 minutes or so. I don't know. I'm open now for suggestions. Go ahead. I see Trevor's hand first.
I also agree that it's very useful, and they do bring some information. I think if we just simply gave them a timer and a running timer for both their speech, because that's what it is, and the Q&A, then they would stick with it. If they know they have 5 minutes total, they would stick with 5 minutes total. I do think there should be a difference between when an elected official attends and a rep. So there should be two different time standards. But I think we should just give them a timer, and as soon as it's over, it's over. If they want to talk more or discuss something, do it offline.
Thank you, Trevor. Susan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I don't know why I can't find myself on the participant list. That's why I'm not raising my hand the right way. So I think I want to say for the elected officials, they're doing amazing work during this period. They really are, and they're doing things they ordinarily don't do. And I think it's important for us to hear some of that. And I think sometimes board members, like I remember at the last one, Kay Webster brought up Ron Kim nursing home thing. And I thought that was really important. And she got the other elected officials to actually commit themselves. And I think those are really valuable. I do understand there are some of the members that talk on forever, and I would like to volunteer Alicia to give them a call and explain the situation and explain that people want to hear them, but they but there are also complaints that they're too long because our meetings go too long. The first virtual meeting we had, Michael knows this, I tried to organize them both as content and time. And I will tell you, I will never, ever try and organize those offices again. It was horrendous. They change, you know, they're going millions of places and all that. They change it. A lot of it is the nature. Some of them are just more considerate than others, but it's also a nature of what they're doing. So I think we need to talk to them about not talking so long, but they need to give us the really, particularly now, the really important information, and to hear some comments about legislation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think perhaps I will ask them all for narratives, if they could just limit themselves to like maybe 3 of the most important things that they believe that the community needs to hear at the moment. Because I do agree that we do have to have a lot of the information that they share, because stuff is now happening like this, you know, like it's popping, you know, like the bills that are passing in the assembly and all of these things with the police, you know, reconstruction and all of this. So, I mean, like, I think it's important for us to allow them to speak, but I don't want to hear the same thing from different people. If it's the same thing, everyone doesn't have to say it over and over again because we've already heard it. So I do understand, Susan, how hard it is to coordinate them. But I will definitely reach out to the elected officials, and I will ask them if they could please just limit themselves to like 3 main points of interest to the public. And then if the board members have questions, they can ask specific questions and try not to keep it more than 2 minutes to their questions.
Can I chime in here? Because this is usually the section that I'm running anyway.
Sure, go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I mean, I agree that, you know, I think part of the issue is, like you said, a lot of them are telling us the same information. And some of that is because they're not logging on for the whole meeting. They're logging on for the 10 minutes that they have to speak. They don't know what was said before or after them. You know, so that's become an issue also because, you know, as Susan said, there was one meeting where we tried to organize them and we didn't, and it failed miserably. And then this last meeting, people were logging on and either me or Susan were getting messages from their reps. So-and-so is on, can they speak next? They have to jump off by 8 o'clock or they have to be there. They have to be, you know, and so we either have to, I think we as a committee need to decide, are we going to be hardlined about this or are we going to be wishy-washy about it? Because right now I think we're being a little bit of both. We're being accommodating to some and not accommodating to others. You know, I am perfectly fine putting a timer on them, but I've been told in the past that that's insulting to do it to the elected. It's fine to do it to the representative, but not to the elected. You know, and I believe our bylaws say 5 minutes for the elected and 2 minutes for the rep. And, you know, we haven't abided by that. And neither have the electeds. Even when we tell them they have a 5-minute limit, they go on for 10. So we need to draw a line in the sand here or decide that we're not going to draw a line in the sand here.
Yeah, I think, Michael, I think because of COVID, I think that we've had sort of a leniency because we're kind of all new to the Zoom stuff and new to having to meet like this. So I do understand your point, and it's true. I think that we just have to set a standard, and I need to have some conversations with them individually, just to say, you know, there are some elected officials that are on it, like they're really good at keeping under the 10-minute time frame, right? And then there's those that get a little bit, they stretch out a little bit more. So I think, again, I'm going to take Susan's challenge on and contact each one of them and have conversations with them about, you know, adhering to at least 5 minutes and really addressing maybe 3 things of interest to what's going on right now that they think that we need to hear for our district, right? Maylee, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I kept changing my mind. But that's why it was up and down. So I just want to let you know, last meeting, I think the elected official part went until after 9. maybe until 9:30, I don't remember. So if you want, I don't know if everyone here looks at that kind, you know, is that the length of time we should be spending on elected official reports? That's about 2.5 hours.
No, I mean, that's why I said I will talk to them each individually and say to them, give us 3 things of interest that is for our particular district, and try to keep it under 10 minutes apiece. Because even if we're not going to get every elected official coming to every full board meeting, right? So we know that. But just trying to, if I reach out to them individually, I think I could, you know, kind of persuade them to get them to understand, like, this was not an ideal meeting, right? So that for the next full board meeting, this doesn't happen again. I mean, and then we discovered some things also, like Michael and I both discovered that you can cut people off. You know, you don't have to allow people to continue. You can actually say, okay, like, we've already discussed this, like, we don't have to discuss this again and again, right? So yeah. Lisa, I see your hand. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry. I really think we need to be a little tougher. I really think they can take it. I think we need to limit the entire amount of time available to the electeds. And I think that they have enough respect for each other that will help. In addition to us saying, you've got 5 minutes and we'll take 3 minutes worth of questions. I mean, I think it's not accurate to think that every elected official isn't going to show up, because I think they basically have. Maybe one didn't in the last month, but other than the mayor, I mean, just about every local elected, from the Congress people, the several Congress people to the state reps showed up. And the city. So I also think that we should consider having the electeds at the end.
Thank you, Lisa.
Can I ask one more question? Susan has her hand up too. I just want to ask one more question though about the elected section. Is it mainly out of respect that we do it in the order that we do it in? Is there any reason why we can't just change it up every once in a while and call on people randomly?
I think there is an order, and I think it goes, I believe I've been told it goes by the size of the district, but I don't know that anyone really cares. I don't know if you want to look at what other boards do, or, you know, we don't always go in order anyway, so.
Michael, maybe at Borough Board, you can ask that question.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Susan.
The one comment I was going to make, and the good news is the election is at the end of June, and people that you never saw before, you will again never see.
Yeah, this is true. Okay, let's go on to the next business section. Business session. Yeah, let's talk. Oh, Michelle, I see your hand. Was it about business session, or is it about
well, I just want to know what we decided on. Did we decide on doing a timer? Did we decide on, like, I know that you're going to call the elected officials, Alicia, and just impart to them the importance of being brief where possible, but in terms of any of the other tools, are we going to adopt any of those?
Yeah, so right now I'm going to reach out to them and limit them to at least 5 to 10 minutes tops. I'm going to, yeah, right now. And Michael is going to ask at Borough Board what other community boards have been doing for elected officials reports. So I'm going to, you know, listen in on the, so we should hear back from Michael at the next the next executive committee Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Business session, let's talk about it. So we had a couple of people, I will say, I see your hand, Alex. I will say that there are a few people that got long-winded. I am having a private conversation with one person in particular on Friday afternoon to address that person's behavior and actions. But, you know, I don't know. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Alicia. I was going to agree with Mei Lee about the chat, which is that it was like two conversations or series of conversations going on at the same time. Our real public meetings don't have that. It's not recorded, and people were responding verbally to things that were in writing. It's very distracting. Right? It's very distracting to try to follow what your other committee members are talking about when they're referring to something that happened in writing that maybe you're even going to miss because, you know, if you don't catch it in time, a number of comments might push it up off your screen and you might not get a chance to look at it. But what we should be focusing on is what we're saying, you know, that we're listening to what other people are saying, which is really, you know, what we're supposed to be doing as board members. And I do agree with Mei Lee that probably the best way to do it is to, and maybe Michael will say this, but probably the best way to do this is to eliminate the chat.
Yeah, I think that
I'm sorry, I didn't say eliminate, I said limit.
Well, can I chime?
That's why I said Michael. Yeah.
Michael, you want to talk about it, but I just wanted to say really quickly, Michael, before you weigh in. I will say that we did discover a lot about that chat. And I will say that we have, Jackie and Susan and myself have been working on a draft letter to address one member's behavior in particularly, and that it's going to be addressed. So yeah, Michael, go ahead and talk about what you decided.
Sure. Well, I haven't decided anything. I want to talk more. The Zoom technology is item, the fourth item. I wanted to stick on the business session first, and I don't think there's a lot to say here other than, to be honest with you, the onus is on me because again, it was the first time I was running the whole meeting. I wasn't prepared to run the whole meeting, and there's a lot that I didn't know. And one of the things that I didn't know, and thanks to this lovely book that I've been reading for the past couple of days about Robert's rules, I now know that people can only speak twice to an agenda item. And, I was going by the hands raised. I was just letting people say what they wanted to say. And, now that I know the rules a little bit better, I'll be a little bit more prepared and a little bit more forceful about cutting the conversations when they need to be cut and cutting people off when they need to be cut off. But, as far as how the business session was ran, a lot of it, the length of it was my fault because I just kept calling on everybody. So Susan has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to go, the Roberts rules, which I also just found out about it. We've never done it, but it sounds wonderful. That a member can speak twice to an item, no more than 2 minutes each time. And I have found out that Community Board 1 does that, and it seems to work for them.
Okay, Jackie, I see your hand. Jackie,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes, I just want to thank Michael for finding out that information from Robert's rule. Just a question, does that rule also apply to committee meetings? Because that would also be very helpful.
It applies to any meeting run under Robert's rules, which is all of our meetings are.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
I know Susan has I believe Susan has a number of copies of Robert's rules in the office. I bought for myself the Robert Rules of Orders in brief. It's only 200 pages and I've read half of it already in 2 days. So if anyone wants to buy it themselves, look for that on Amazon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, I see your hand. About business session, Linda? Linda, unmute yourself.
Yes, Yes, I'm unmuted. I was just going to say that I saw Susan's physical hand ahead of my Zoom.
Okay,
So if Susan wanted to talk, I yield.
fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
I think the Roberts rule is great. Let's do it. That would take care of quite a few of the issues we have in committee discussion. In terms of the technology, is there something there, Michael, that would allow you to kick people out of the chat?
Could I speak to the Robert rules before we go to technology?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think the rules I have in the office, I'll look and see, but I think they're a condensed form. But I will also see if I can get a full book on to put under member resources. I believe if in the community board handbook, I believe it says we should use Robert's rules, but you don't have to exclusively do that. It's up to the chair if the chair wants to deviate.
Yes, Susan, I would like to say, actually, I think that's a great idea to put it under members' resources. I think that's really great. Yeah.
So
thank you, Susan, for that suggestion. Go ahead,
technology, Mike. Sorry. I was going to say something else and now I forgot, but technology-wise, so there's no way to kick people out of the chat, but there is a way to disable that. So we can, like right now our chat box is open. I can actually change the setting and turn it off if I want to.
So it's either chat or no chat, but there's no.
Yeah. So the settings are either we can change the setting in our account, and then any meeting or webinar we set up, chat won't be allowed, or the meeting, or we leave the setting on the account that chats are allowed, and then on a per meeting basis, we can either disable or enable the chat feature if we don't want to use it. The way that I was thinking about it for full board potentially was that we leave it open for the first half an hour for attendance so that people can sign in, and then close it. That's what I would propose.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or, you know, if you notice somebody abusing it, just shut it off.
I saw Lisa's hand and then Michelle's hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm a little worried about the 2 speaker per committee. I think it can, or 2 times per member speaking at committees. I think it can work at the full board. I think we have to be sure we announce that that's a new procedure, because I sure didn't know, I'd never heard that before. But at committee, I really think each committee should adopt its own rule. I don't think the Roberts rule has to be set in stone. We can say we're going to limit discussion per person at each committee, but we don't have to say 2. But I'm just worried in a committee where it's more conversational, that 2 seems unworkable to me, or very restrictive.
Well, Lisa, just to say, I know that we have a committee member who has been going to each committee and voicing their opinion and has been dominating, and a lot of people don't get an opportunity to weigh in and speak, and that person may not sit on any particular committee that they're speaking on, and they have a tendency to take over, and so other committee members are not stepping up and actually having a voice or an actual opportunity to speak. So we have to, for some people, do that. We may need to set limitations and follow that Roberts rules. I mean, I do understand what you're saying, though.
I'm sorry, before we get deep into this conversation, I want to, either I or Susan or somebody misquoted. The rule in the book, which I have open right now, is that you may speak and debate twice on any debatable motion on the same day. Each time you may speak for up to 10 minutes. These limits apply to any organization that has not adopted special rules, blah, 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 blah. You can't save your time, so you can't speak for 5 minutes once and then 15 minutes the next time. So it's 10 minutes per speaking engagement, not 2.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Michael, for clarification. I know that Michelle's hand was next, and then Trevor. Michelle?
Thanks. Just to clarify, I think we're melding business session and use of technology. Should I speak on one or the other?
I would say let's speak on business session and then try to close out business session so that we can move to technology.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess actually, unfortunately, the chat thing kind of spans both, or do you think that should wait?
No, that's fine, go ahead.
Okay, so I just was poking around and it looks like there's the capacity to, if we use panelists, that we could limit the attendees to speaking only with panelists and not with other attendees. And perhaps that's a way to keep it only for attendance and technical issues rather than having like discussions there. Now that doesn't keep panelists from having the chat, which could be like a parallel meeting as we were talking about, but perhaps that would limit it. I know that in one of our committee meetings about open streets, there was just so much chatter in the chat box about like ideas for open streets and all that stuff, which is obviously out of order when we're thinking about Robert's rules. So just a suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Trevor? Trevor, I see.
Yeah, I'm gonna adjust if that panelist option is available. I'd like to hear Michael's sort of opinion on that because the chat can get a bit out of control. Yeah. But also, the opinion on changing the chat to panelists only, as opposed to completely eliminating it, what's the drawback to that?
Well, so here's the options right now. If I go into the chat box, my options are to the attendees of the meeting. I can either give them the option to chat with everybody, the panelists and the other attendees, just the panelists, or nobody. So that does not stop the panelists from talking to each other, which, to be quite honest with you, at our last board meeting was the issue. There was the panelist. It was other board members basically having their own meetings going on. What I equate it to is, when we're in the auditorium at the high school and people are chatting in the back or chatting in their seats and sort of being disruptive and we have to shush them, that's my version of the chat box.
So what's the drawback to just stopping the chat box or stopping it into the meeting once we've taken attendance?
None. I mean, the only drawback is that there have been a handful of times where somebody will use the chat box to tell me that they're having technical issues. Like, for instance, Eric Diaz today used it to say, hey, I joined by phone, this is my phone number, so that I can give him the ability to speak.
So can it be set that so that you only get comments, or the person who's running the meeting gets the comments?
I don't believe so, but I can play around and maybe ask Noel from Beta NYC for some technical assistance.
Okay, because that would limit it, well, you would try and limit it to just technical questions, but that way, if someone had to really say something, you would see that particular message. And the other comments with regards to the time limit and the amount of people who can speak, I think it's going to be difficult in the committee, and I think it's really going to be up to the chairs to sort of control. I know exactly what folks are talking about, but I think it's going to be up to the chair to control who speaks and how much a person speaks, because the committee discussion can go on for hours, and we only talk twice. It would be really difficult. But as long as it's up to the chair's discretion, I think it's fine.
Paul?
I was just thinking, I think Michelle had said it before about having like a Google link doc for attendance to put into the chat room so people can click on that link to go in and populate their attendance. That way it's easier instead of just it constantly jumping into the chat box, and then it's going to look all over the place, and then that chat box is open the entire time. I don't know. Maybe if that's something that's a little bit easier to do, if that's even allowed.
I'm not sure. I mean, I
don't know, Mike.
I think it's allowed. The problem is that we're now introducing another set of technology that we're asking somebody to use, which, again, part of the reason we don't do the pre-registration for our meetings and we don't password our meetings is because we're trying to leave them as open to the public as possible. the other thing for me personally, and this might just be my computer, is that if I try to do anything else while I'm in a Zoom meeting, the Zoom meeting freezes. Zoom just sucks up all the energy of my computer and doesn't like it when I try to open something else. So that might cause another issue for people as well, which is the only reason why I would vote against it. Susan has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that with Google, it's just going to be, they're going to start making comments there. You know, I think it'll just, if that's the only place where they can write and they have the ability to write, they'll just make comments there.
So it seems to me, so that we can move on, I think, from at least the chat box conversation, it seems to me the two options that have been most discussed are either turning it off completely after the first half an hour, or after the first half an hour, just allowing the panelists to chat with each other and not allowing the attendees to chat. So I think those are the two things we're weighing. I don't know how we vote on this, but I guess.
Yeah, I don't know either, Michael, because I think that we do have to come to a conclusion, because at the end of the day, everyone is right. There were two different meetings going on at the time. I mean, we had a board member that just got sucked into the chat to the point where it swayed her vote. So, I mean, we have to just be conscious of that people are using the chat line to do all kinds of stuff. And then there was bullying going on in the chat. So, I mean, like, we have to kind of figure out, like, what we're going to do with this chat thing.
So why don't we do this? Linda has her hand up. Why don't we hear what Linda has to say, and then we'll take a vote by having people raise their hand for one of the options.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, Linda, go ahead.
Okay, so it may be incorrect of me to say this, but the violators were both board members. So limiting it to the panel does not do the job.
I know, that's what I said earlier.
we have members of our community board who are that rude and undisciplined. What are we going to do?
Yeah. Susan, go ahead.
I'm just going to make a suggestion to turn it off after 1 hour, which gives people plenty of technical time, and try it for the next meeting and see how it goes.
Okay. So why don't we do this? So if you're in agreement that we turn off chat after the first hour for everybody at the next meeting, raise your hand on the feature, not on the screen. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's almost everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7, I think. Hold on.
Where's my hand? Where's my hand? Yeah, my hand is up too, Michael.
All right, mine too. So that's 10 of us.
Yeah. So that's good.
That's what we're going to do.
Yep.
At the next meeting, we will turn it off after the first hour.
Yeah, good. Excellent.
Are there other technical issues with Zoom that we need to talk about? I mean, my only other pet peeve with Zoom is people talking over each other, because they do it all the time.
Yeah.
But anything else technical wise? Michelle?
My only other question is, is there any objection to committee chairs choosing to do their meetings in panelist format? Or is this something we want to decide on as a group?
The only reason we decided that initially, when we started this was, again, the access issue. So again, attendees, you can make attendees give the attendees the ability to speak and lead them to the portal, or you can move them as a panelist if you wanted to move them as a panelist. The only other issue with changing committee meetings to a webinar or webinar rather than a meeting is that there's a little bit more work on the back end, and that I have to invite everybody to be a panelist. You can't just send somebody a link and then they join it, because then they wind up as an attendee. So there's a little bit of work on the back end that Mainly, I kind of only have to do once as long as I set up the meeting as a recurring meeting. If I don't set it up as a recurring meeting, then I have to set it up every single time that we have a webinar. So that's why, like, if you noticed, our exec meetings have the same exact Zoom number because it's set up as a recurring meeting so that I don't have to invite you to it all the time. So it's always the same meeting number.
Is it something though that if we decided, like as a small committee, for example, transportation, you make one person like if we are managing it ourselves, for example, like I did it this week, I could just invite people from attendee to panelist, or sorry, I can move people from attendee to panelist during the meeting because it's only like 5 of us.
Yeah, whoever's hosting the meeting can move people from attendee to panelist, or just leave them as an attendee and give them the option to speak.
Right. Okay, so like we could do this in a webinar format if Paul, I'm not speaking for Paul, but if Paul decided he wanted to do it for next month's transportation, I'm running it and you don't have to invite anyone. We can just do it as hosts.
Well, yeah, but I would have to set up your meeting next month as a webinar. You can't, like, once it's set up, I mean, on the back end, I can go in and just switch it from one mode to the other. But again, I think, I don't mind, but I think it's either we do it for all the committees or we don't. But you know, I mean, I'm fine if one committee wants to run it a different way, but again, it just makes it a little weird for people who are attending meetings one way somewhere and then a different way somewhere else. But I mean, we're all adults. I think we can deal with that. Susan, do you see any issue with that?
I don't.
Okay.
Linda has her hand up, Michael.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Linda.
Just a small question. I know there's a lot of versions of Zoom flying around and a lot of different, levels of it. It seems to me I have seen yes, no on the bottom toolbar on sometimes when I'm in a meeting, which looks like some way to vote.
So yeah, so that's
useful for us.
Well, that is in the meeting function that is available. I don't think it's available in the webinar function. In the meeting function, it's available. The reason we did not start using that is because up until recently, with an upgrade that they did, it didn't tell you who was voting how. It just tallied up the yeses and the nos at the bottom. Now, with the latest upgrade, you actually see the yes or the no next to the person's name, so you actually know who's voting and how they're voting. The other reason we didn't use it from the onset was because, again, our meetings were open to everybody, and so there's public. The public would have been able to vote as well because they had the same access that the committee members did. So
it seems like it would be useful for this particular meeting.
I mean, if you're doing on a committee level, like, I already had a conversation with Susan about this. Like, if committees want to run things their own way on Zoom, like, there's no standard. There's no, like, this is how you have to do it. So if you want to use the yes, no feature for smaller votes, that's fine. But for votes that need to be part of the record, you need to do it as a roll call because that's the only way it becomes part of the record.
Right.
Okay, I saw hands, Paul's hand, and then Susan.
Yeah, even though Michelle said she wasn't speaking for me, there was a lot of fear from me yesterday entering into committee, thinking there was going to be a lot more people there. So in my mind, and I spoke with Michelle prior to the meeting, I was like, I kind of wish this was a panelist format or a webinar because I was expecting a lot more people because of what the agenda item was. So that was my biggest fear, is that sometimes we're just going to have agenda items that are going to have a lot of people, like maybe more appropriate for when it was in May. That's my thing. I kind of like the webinar feature and having the committee members as panelists. I think it makes it a little bit easier for us. That's just my opinion.
I mean, we can set up the, when the calendar is finalized, if you or any of the other chairs want me to set up their meeting as a webinar instead of a meeting, let me know, because I usually set up those meetings as soon as the calendar is finalized.
Okay. Susan?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as voting, the raised hand works for like straw poll type stuff, but the roll call, kind of mimics the transparency of our physical meeting. So even if somebody is on the phone or watching the video, the votes will be transparent.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, so are we all set? Can we move forward?
I believe we can.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go back to trainings. So I know we covered it before as far as the trainings were concerned of the subjects. So now we have to look at a calendar. Susan, I think you had your calendars out so that we could look at possible dates for trainings. And then Lisa, I'm asking that you would help me. And I guess maybe I can ask for one other person to help Lisa and myself with the trainings for new members and all members, actually. I don't want to just limit it to new members because I think there's some other members of our community board that could benefit from some of the trainings that we have proposed.
So can I give some dates, possible dates?
Sure, Susan, go ahead.
Okay, because I think it would be great if we could resolve that now. We don't know. Looks like the 70 Mulberry is probably going to be the week of June 22nd, but I don't know what day. So I would like to not do it at that time. I would suggest the week of June 29th through, well, we have a, I don't know, does anyone know when when July 4th holiday is? Is it?
Well, it's going to be on that Saturday.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
July 4th is Saturday, but it's observed on Friday. At least for my office, we have Friday off.
Okay, so I don't know if you think people will still be going away. I would like to suggest there's free is June 29th, 30th, July 1st, and July 6th or 7th.
I'd like to say June 29th is a good day because then that way I can announce it at full board. And then we could start to register people. I think that we should do some RSVPs so that people will know like what's the cutoff date for an RSVP to say that they're going to be in attendance for the Zoom. I would say RSVP by June 26th, maybe. The 26th is a Friday. So that way we know who's going to show up on Monday. What is everyone thinking?
I think that's fine. It doesn't matter if people, you know, if a few, you want to make sure you have enough people, but if a few extra show up last minute, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. So is everyone in agreement to that? That will be, the first one will be like office procedures and Robert's rule.
So that's actually not what they were. If we were looking at what we did last year, I think the topics got mixed up. What we've always done is how to write a resolution, which is really important. If you want to add Robert's rules to that. And
okay, so we're going to say that it is, okay, how to write a resolution, because the Zoom shouldn't be any more than 2 hours, right?
It should be more than it. If you're talking about how to write a resolution, Robert's rules, which I assume you're not going to go into in depth, and office, you know, what is I think we called it, what does the office do? That should be, I would think, way less than, you know, absolutely less than 2 hours.
Okay, so let's propose that to be the Monday one, the 29th of June.
And during that first session, we had also talked at our previous meeting about adding some of the information from the training that we did with the facilitator.
Right. I'm going to call David right now and see if he can do that.
Okay. And then the second date, possibly maybe the next day after, or like give people a rest and say that Wednesday, which will be July 1, What is everyone thinking?
I think that's too close together. Why do we need to have them quite so concentrated?
Okay.
I think a little more of a break would get more people there.
Okay. So what do you?
The second one is we had talked about it being something that includes some of the committee chairs, right? Talking about their committees.
It was, the second one was going to be about, yeah, committee chairs talking about their committees. Actually, it was going to be SLA and land use, discussing language. Am I correct?
Yes, I believe so.
So, okay, Lisa, I agree with you, but we just have to look at the calendar for meetings, for proposed meeting dates for the month of July, because there's quite a few committee meetings in July.
Well, can we just make it, if we're doing the first one on the 29th, can't we just make it the following Monday on the 6th so that the two trainings are a week apart?
Oh yeah, we don't have any meetings on that Monday.
But that some people may be doing the 4th of July on the 6th.
That's true.
The 7th.
We can do the 7th.
The 7th, okay. Yeah, okay. So let's say that the 29th and the 7th for proposed dates. I'd love to lock those in. So Susan, as soon as you hear back from David, let us know.
Yeah, he didn't answer, but I texted him.
Okay. That would really be great to be able to announce that and to also go ahead and send out the information. Yeah. Okay, that's it. I guess we're just waiting to hear back.
Can
But
I suggest one more thing?
Go ahead, Susan.
We did like one pagers to summarize what was at the meeting a couple years ago, and we have that under member resources. And I think if for the other topics, it's a really good. People are able to do that. It's really helpful for people to review.
Yeah. So, Alex, that would be you for SLA, and Jackie, that would be you for land use. So
Yes.
a one pager for specific language, like what is a ULUP and what is, Alex, for you, the 500-foot rule, and what is, common things that people need to know.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you both so much. And if you could get that to, yeah, if you could get that to me before the 29th of June, that would be helpful.
And you want us to divide up the meeting so that we're each giving a half-hour presentation? Okay.
Yes, at least a half an hour, and then people can respond to you if they have questions. Okay?
David confirmed the 29th.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's lock that in. And then, Lisa, what do you think that we could be able to generate like a little synopsis about what the two trainings are going to be about and send them out to the full board?
If I really understood what they were, yes, I'd need some more backup. I do recall, I'm sorry I didn't retain it very well, but I do recall some conversation about it a couple months ago, but I need more background.
Okay, we'll get that for you. Thank you. How soon do you need it, Lisa?
Sooner the better.
Okay. All right. So, Susan, do you think we could get something to Lisa before full board?
Well, for the ones I'm doing, we have the one pager that should give you information. Same thing for how to write a resolution. I can give her the links. Robert's rules, I think should be just a sentence. So those are the ones. I wasn't going to do it for the other stuff.
Should we arrange a time to talk about this? Maybe, I don't think everybody needs to be on this discussion.
I would suggest that maybe, you know, maybe there's two meetings, two small meetings. For the first, you know, the first training is obviously going to be, I think, me, Susan, Alicia, and David Crane. So maybe the four of us should meet with Lisa to go over what that meeting is going to look like.
That would be great.
And then the second meeting is going to be Alex and Jackie, and I'm assuming Alicia and Susan as well. So,
No.
oh, so then, you know, so then there's a separate. I think that would be better rather than taking up everyone else's time right now.
I couldn't agree more. Great idea, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So social media is the next item on the agenda.
Nothing to update other than, you know, keep sending stuff that you think is relevant. We actually haven't, at least I haven't seen a lot of stuff coming in about to be posted. So if you see stuff going on, send it our way.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Any other business? Any old business? Okay, any new business?
Yes.
Okay.
I had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I feel like we need to talk a little bit more about the issue of having clear and transparent items on an agenda in advance. There was a very difficult situation that people on this call have heard now alluded to at the Economic Development Committee meeting. I really appreciate Susan saying clearly that she understands that that was a problem. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what she thinks could be done to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I think that there really is, that the issues of the votes that were taken at that meeting were out of order, and I really think they should be revisited.
So you want me to respond?
I would, yes, thank you, Susan.
Okay, so first of all, to address, oh, they're both easy, actually. Regarding the votes, I think of 3 of the votes are, Anisha, do you want me to speak to it, or do you want to speak to the votes?
Sure, you can start. I'll add.
Okay, so since that meeting, legislation has been passed that makes 2 of them unnecessary, so that might be easy. As far as the agenda items, I 100% agree that they should be clear to someone who doesn't have any idea what's going on. I think generally, overall, and I've been told that our agendas usually are more so this way than most. It is not my responsibility. I work with the chairs, I suggest items, but you know, I'm not the final decision. And you know, that's why I create draft agendas. And I will just say, and you know, I think there's been a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems as people have been rushing to deal with this emergency. I think they're learning from them. As far as I am concerned, I will try and work with the chairs, and I will make sure they always have a draft agenda 2 times to look at to make sure that things are good. Now, I'm sending it to the exec because it's easier than sending it to the chairs. So I think it would be great if all the officers also looked at it, and anything didn't seem clear, they should question it.
You look like you want to say something.
I guess, I mean, one of the confusions, as I understand it at that meeting, and I can't say I watched every minute of it, but I watched about 2/3 of it on the video. There seemed to be a confusion about the chair versus the vice chair, and so when you say the chair, is it only the chair that's getting the draft resolutions, or is it sometimes the vice chair?
So when I send it to the exec, the vice chairs do not get
No,
it.
that's the agenda. I'm talking now about draft resolutions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't make the switch. The chair. I don't remember. I think, so generally it's, Jim and I just go back and forth with the chair. I believe this last time we did it with both because there was input from both.
So I want to add a couple of things to this. I think that, and I don't mean this in an insulting way to Anisha or Paul at all, but because they're new chairs, I think that we have to cut them a little bit of slack because they're still learning very much on the job, and they are relying heavily on their vice chairs for that as well. But I do want to say that, because I was running that meeting, and it was a little weird, and it was almost, I feel badly talking bad about Megan because she's very willingly stayed on with us as a public member, but I don't think that she ran that meeting well, and I also don't think that she disclosed her conflict of interest about the fact that she's on the board of the bid. And it was very evident that those resolutions were written by the bid.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, although the office generally drafts resolutions, in this case, we didn't draft the resolution, but we did make comments on certain things like, well, this is covering city and state. You don't want to cover both in one resolution type of thing.
And I want to make sure that everyone knows that on one of the items that a resolution was written, that the state went ahead and the SLA went ahead and they approved the sidewalk extensions. Yeah, I see 2 hands up. I saw, who was that first? Alex, and then Anisha.
So I guess I have to agree with the sort of the direction that this, I guess, conversation is taking. What I've seen in last month and this month are topics raised that aren't really reflected in the agenda, that seem to be, I guess, presented as something we need to vote on in some sort of emergent way. Coincidentally or not, they're all involving resolutions introduced by the Lower East Side Partnership. So I saw that happen with transportation, where they were asked to consider and vote on the extension of dining to outdoor dining, where their only agenda item was to hear locations to consider for possible pedestrian closures, like street closures for pedestrians for social distancing purposes. For the meeting, the economic development meeting, it just, and it's hard, sitting at the exec, even as an experienced person, to question the vagueness of an agenda item and to ask what's really meant by it. It's like asking, about that you're seeing the absence of something, I guess. So, so that agenda item really just sort of said immediate needs of small businesses or something to that effect. And we ended up voting on something that I said I didn't think we should even vote on because it was unnecessary. And in fact, you're right, by executive order, it then became moot on Sunday, which was the extension of indoor licenses to outdoor dining spaces. But we also voted on something that seemed to have nothing to do with small businesses, in that we voted on tax relief for landlords, which I think is something that, we should consider and should consider for a vote, but it wasn't reflected at all in the agenda item that we were going there to discuss. So I do think that, well, withdrawn. I think that the way that it has looked, because of where all the resolutions are coming from and how they were presented, it's beginning to look like a design, whether or not it is, and that reflects badly on all of us. And I don't want people to look at what we're doing or how we're hearing agenda items and think that we're doing it in some way that is less than transparent and doesn't involve the public. That's it.
Anisha, go ahead.
Sure. So it was my first meeting as chair, so it was, incredibly difficult for that to be how everything unfolded. I will agree with everybody else on this, committee that the way that the agenda item was written did not reflect what was actually discussed. And I don't think it was really anticipated that, it showed as one item on an agenda, and I don't think any committee member would have any idea that they would show up and there would be 3 resolutions, because it all really happened at the last minute. And I also think it was pretty apparent that, while, there was input in drafting some of the stuff, it was very heavily handed by certain groups or certain, catered towards a certain type of issue. And you wouldn't have known that from the agenda item. I think certainly a learning experience for me, but I would agree with my fellow, Economic Development Committee members that it was not handled well. And having known that in the previous month, something very similar happened in transportation, it was disappointing to see it sort of repeat itself again when we talked about it.
Thank you, Anisha. I believe that Mr. Hewitt wanted to say something as well. Herman?
When listening to Lisa and Alicia, I totally agree with it. And like I posted on there that, and Michael said that it was not disclosed how the motion came about, and that the person who were running the meeting had a conflict. And besides, let's put in my 2 cents, because I didn't get into there, is that I agreed to the fact that we should get the resolutions to the committee members in a reasonable time so I could go through it. And I sat there and I only made 2 little suggestions because it was just being pushed through. The fact that I did not have time to make any conversation regarding how the resolution supposed to be put together. And I'm glad that there was, some of it didn't mean anything the day after, but I think it was not a proper way of presenting those resolutions. And I hope in the future it doesn't happen that way anymore. That's my 2 cents, Alicia.
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. All right, does anyone else have anything to say before we conclude?
Yeah, I would like to hear from some of the members of that or people that attended that committee meeting, whether they feel, my gut says that those 3 items should be pulled and reconsidered at a future meeting, because there were people from other bids at that or other business groups there who felt that those resolutions were one-sided. Some credible organizations in our neighborhood who have deep division or deep reservations about some of the provisions in those resolutions were not forewarned. In reading those resolutions, am really concerned that they don't reflect the totality of our interests. It talks about the landlords, but it doesn't talk about the commercial tenants who have a rent burden. I feel like there was a conflict of interest. I feel like there wasn't disclosure. I really am concerned about those resolutions and them remaining on our agenda for a full board vote. So I am asking other people who were present to speak to that.
Okay, Alex, your hand is up.
Well, I think that the ones that are moot should be tabled, because why would we send it, for example, why would we send a resolution to the SLA when the governor by executive order has already extended indoor licenses to contiguous outdoor dining? It doesn't make sense. And I've heard over and over again that we shouldn't overwrite resolutions because it doesn't make us look great. It certainly doesn't make us look great to send a resolution to an agency that's already doing the thing we're exhorting it to do. I don't know what the other resolution is that had subsequent legislation addressing it in the past week. So I can't speak to that one, but I agree with Lisa that the third resolution was the most general, the one that sort of had a support for small businesses, but also included explicitly initially something about Chinatown, and then it became broader to just address issues of discrimination involving small businesses, and also had like an explicit whereas about allowing DCA applicants to open sidewalk cafes before their application is passed. So that at least was more tailored toward, I guess, what the agenda item was. The other 2 I didn't think were, but I'm not sure which of the 2 remaining ones was the one that had red legislation addressing it. So can you just tell me which one that is?
Anisha?
This is Anisha. So there were 3 resolutions. One was the SLA one was the property tax one, and then one was the more general commercial tenants, sort of small business support. The SLA one should be, taken off. There's no reason to do that. And then we had also, or Susan and I, there was some back and forth about the property tax for the small landlords one also being removed. I believe Margaret Chin introduced something to address that, which was actually more aggressive than the one that we had discussed. So it doesn't make sense for us to keep moving forward with that. I would agree with you, Alex, though, that the one that I think was not necessarily a great resolution, but did actually more reflect what the agenda item was and was broader and included a number of things. That did have the most discussion at committee. So I do think people, for better or worse, were able to weigh in on that resolution, and it should stay.
Thank you, Anisha.
Well, is the appropriate action here then to remove or to table indefinitely since they've been addressed?
I can speak to that.
Susan?
Okay, so we've already discussed that with David Crane. You can't just, pull it. There's 2 options. The most correct way is to leave it on the vote sheet and then at the full board table it indefinitely. The other thing you can do that would be give people a heads up before then, which David said was also permissible, is to leave the headings on there on the vote sheet and to note underneath that they have been dropped because the legislation referred to has already been passed. So those are two options. The most correct thing is to leave it on the vote sheet and table it indefinitely.
Trevor?
That's what I was.
Trevor?
Same topic. I lowered my hand.
The only problem with, maybe we can note on the vote sheet that there will be a vote to table it, because I think it's fair, as people have mentioned, there are a lot of people had their concerns, and I think it's only fair to give them a heads up that how the issue will be dealt with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how will we do that?
Well, one way was, is to note it on the vote sheet, or you could leave everything on the vote sheet, but put a note above it and say, because this legislation has already been passed, there will be a motion to table indefinitely. That's my one suggestion off the top of my head. If someone else has anything else, that would be great.
I would say, let's go with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Thank you, Lisa. Anisha, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone, it's now 9 o'clock. Trevor, you have one more thing you needed to say?
Yes, just one more thing. If we could discuss it at the next exec meeting. I don't know if the structure of everyone's committee is chair, vice chair, secretary, or the role. I know I have a quirk in my committee where I've had a vice chair for quite some time, but I also have a secretary. So I just wonder if we can discuss that at the next exec as to, I know it's up to each chair, but do we have any standards on what the vice chair should be, or should it be the secretary?
Could you elaborate a little bit, Trevor?
I have a vice chair and I have a secretary. The secretary takes minutes, but the vice chair is the vice chair. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I know a few years back, I can't remember who the chair was. We were told that we all needed to get a vice chair. So it wasn't you, Lisa, was it? It
was not me.
Okay, so we were told to get a vice. Say again, Susan?
It's not in the bylaws.
No, I know, but I just wanted some clarification because each committee is a little different.
You don't have to have a vice chair. I think that a secretary is very helpful, and a vice chair is helpful only if you think that you have work commitments and you are not going to be present at some meetings. It's always good to have someone else there to help run your meetings that is familiar with the way you run your meetings. So if you want to continue having a vice chair, that's fine. If not, then you can say you want to eliminate that from your committee.
Right, and maybe it doesn't, maybe we can discuss it another time. It doesn't necessarily raise to the agenda, but I was just looking for some guidance on that for the next exec meeting.
Guidance as to removing your vice chair, or what?
Just what other chairs are doing. Does everyone have a vice chair? Does everyone have a secretary? Does your secretary serve as the vice chair? Do they take minutes?
I think only
it varies from committee to committee. I was just looking for some guidance.
it does. It really does. It's actually the larger committees like yourself, they have vice chairs and secretaries, or secretary, a vice chair or a secretary. But not everyone has all three positions on their committees. It depends on how big the committee is. I do believe, like, Linda does not have either. Right, Linda, am I correct in saying that? You don't have either. You don't have a vice or
correct. I do have a vice chair.
You do have a vice chair. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But not a secretary.
Not a secretary.
Okay. Take up my whole committee.
Okay. So so we will definitely, I can definitely make sure that that goes on the agenda. What would you like to title it, Trevor?
Sure, is that everyone has different committees. Discussion on vice chairs, I guess. I mean, we can clear up the language.
How about just discussion on committee structures?
Okay,
Okay,
that's
that's fine. Primarily because we were instructed to get a vice chair by the previous chair. Does that still hold? I know it's different, but that was the reason why we all had vice chairs.
Are you okay? We'll talk about it then. I just
Right.
want, yeah. Okay, that's fine.
But I think just to prepare everyone for the discussion, I think what I'm hearing Trevor asking for is what are the roles and responsibilities of your vice chair and your secretary if you have one.
Right, and just guidance from other committee members as to what they're doing in each committee.
Okay. All right, Trevor. Thank you. We'll definitely be willing to talk about that. So that being said, I think that's the last thing on our agenda for tonight.
We need a roll call to adjourn.
Roll call.
Motion to adjourn.
Roll call. Michelle?
Okay. Alicia,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lisa. Lisa.
She's trying to unmute herself. I can see her frantically.
Yeah, sorry.
You're okay.
I couldn't move my mouse. Sorry. Yes.
Eric Diaz.
Yes.
Thank you. Michelle Coopersmith. Yes. Herman Hewitt.
Yes.
Anisha Seepin.
Yes.
Mei Lee.
Yes.
Jackie Wong.
Yes.
Linda Jones.
Yes.
Alex Molitano. Alex.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. No, you're fine. Trevor Holland.
Yes.
Paul Rangel.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Peace out.
All right,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have
Okay, bye-bye.
a great weekend.
Bye.